Hi everybody, it's Kelly from Let's Get Clacking. In today's video, we're going to cover how to price your crafted items. Now this is a topic that comes up a lot and it's very often very confusing on what you should be charging clients, what the market related price is for these kinds of things. So I'm going to go over the method that I use when I price my items. That'll hopefully help you to be able to price your items a little easier. Over the years, I've also built up an Excel spreadsheet. This is a document where you can just input one or two different fields and it will pop out a number that you can use as your base for your pricing. I will be sharing that with you in two different formats. Number one is an Excel spreadsheet so that you can download and use it offline. And the other format is a Google Sheets. If you don't have Microsoft Office on your computer, you may not be able to use the Excel. You can just log on to the Google Sheets file and use that instead. So there are, of course, a number of different things that you need to take into consideration when pricing your items. So the first part we're going to go over is materials. Now, materials can cover things like the t-shirt that you're buying for the client and the vinyl that you're putting onto the t-shirt. Now these two things can be difficult to price individually, but when it comes to materials, a very widely used method is to calculate the cost of the raw item that you get from your supplier. As an example, let's take this t-shirt. This t-shirt I bought from Pick n Pay, and it was, I think it was 50 Rand. And the vinyl is a 12 by 12 heat transfer vinyl, and I got it from Snippy Sisters at 40 Rand. However, as an example, when it comes to working out the square meterage of what you're going to be using, I always work it out on A4. Snippy Sisters sells A4, and obviously that works out slightly more expensive per square centimeter or per square meter if you want to work it out that way. But let's take this as an example. I once had a client, and the client wanted a small element of their design in luminous green. So, had I worked out my price for her per meter squared, it would have worked out much cheaper than what it actually costs me to buy the vinyl, because I'm not going to go and buy a meter squared of luminous green, because the chances of me using it before the heat transfer has kind of degraded is very, very small. So when it comes to working out your prices, I always recommend that you work them out on A4 sizes if that is available to you through your supplier, purely because of that reason. You don't want to end up having to buy 300 rands worth of vinyl if you're only going to be using 10 rands worth in a small size. You'd rather price it on a smaller sheet so that you essentially waste less. The reason why I say we normally put a percentage markup on the raw materials is because, as an example, if you're just starting out and you have an order for 2 t-shirts, let's say, you have to get into your car, drive to the supplier, buy the t-shirts, drive home. So if you're only charging them 50 Rand for the t-shirts, you're actually running that at a loss, because it costs you in time as well as petrol and wear and tear on your car, no matter how far or close the shop is. Chances are you might have to drive a couple of kilometers. If you work it out on AA rates, it's normally a few rand per kilometer. So even if the shop is 1 kilometer away, round trip, that's 2 kilometers. Let's say it's 4 Rand a kilometer. That means that you need to charge an additional 8 Rand just to cover the wear and tear on your car as well as your petrol. And then you also need to factor in how you get your vinyl. Do you buy your vinyl in bulk? Do you have to pay shipping from the supplier? I mean, at one stage you probably will get like me, where you have tons of vinyl in your house and it doesn't cost you anything to bring it off the shelf, but to get all of this vinyl for me cost me money, it cost me time. So those kinds of things are costs that you need to recoup. And granted, the cost is very minimal. You're probably only looking at, a few rand per item, but with every few rand per item that you attribute to those elements, that means that you end up losing less money. The second element is time. Time is a very difficult thing to work out, purely because we all know how long it takes to talk to the client, price the design, give them a quote, then they come back and they want to revise the quote. And obviously when it comes to giving a quote, you want to make sure that you do the correct amount of work if it's a custom item to be able to not lose out. I recently had a situation where I was approached by a client for a not a very large job, but there was a lot of back and forth, and I spent several hours just on the quoting phase of the design, and I haven't even done any work, I haven't ordered any items. That time is something that you would also need to factor in, but a lot of these times you're just going to have to work off a base price. Luckily, those kinds of clients don't come around all the time where they want to change things very often, so those are very few and far between. Generally, it's a very simple design, very few back and forths, so that kind of time element is not generally a problem. Something else that you need to take into consideration is the cost of your time. Time is very valuable, and many people, when they're pricing their items, they don't factor in the cost of time. The second aspect of time that you need to keep into consideration is how long does it take you to load the design into Silhouette Studio? How long does it take you to prep your Cameo, to put the HTV onto the mat, or to load it into the Cameo? How long does it take to cut? How long does it take to weed? How long does it take to apply the design onto the t-shirt? If you are able to time yourself from start to finish from one item, that would be probably the most ideal way of working out how long it actually takes you. I know that for me, it could take me up to an hour to make a single t-shirt, purely because it's a case of, like I said, I mean, you putting the design in Silhouette Studio, you're cutting the design, weeding the design, placing it onto the t-shirt. Those things all take quite a bit of time. And if you're not charging for your time, you're not getting paid for your time. And the third aspect that you need to then take into consideration is machinery. Like we talked about cutting the design on your Cameo. Your Cameo is quite an expensive item. I mean, it costs 6,500 rand, and that's just the Cameo. We're not talking about the cutting mat. We're not talking about replacing your blades every so often, replacing your cutting strip if that's something that you need to do. Those kinds of things, they cost money in the long term. If you want to have a business that has long-term goals, then you would want to make sure that you are having provisions for what happens if my Cameo one day reaches its lifespan and I need to buy a new one. Have I accounted for the cost of that Cameo and put that money aside to be able to buy a new one if and when my current one stops working? Granted, the machinery cost is generally a very small cost per item, and it would probably only account for a couple of rand per order, maybe 2 or 3 rand. It's not a large amount of money, but it's still something that you might want to keep into consideration if you're wanting to take this as a serious business more in the long term. And something else that you might want to keep into consideration is profit. Now, profit and time can be interlinked to each other. So if you are charging for your time, a lot of people do see that as their profit because it's not money that they're actually spending. So if you're charging the client for 2 hours of your time at 75 rand an hour, that means that you're making 150 rand as an example. But we'll go over that when we go into the spreadsheet section. And then lastly, we have shipping. How much is it going to cost you to get the item from your home or from your office to your client? As part of shipping, something that I normally add in there is packaging as well. So I would consider it shipping and packaging, because as an example, if you just give the client the t-shirt with no packaging, no wrapping or anything like that, it doesn't send off a very good image for your business. So what you might want to do is to buy tissue paper, to have little labels manufactured, or maybe you would even print and cut them yourself. But all of those things cost money. And those are the kinds of things that you need to work out. How much does it cost me to package this one item? And what do I need to add on to the shipping in order to get this item out to the client? You wouldn't maybe cost it in per item, but that's something that you can totally add in. If you sell mugs as an example, you know that you're going to need to package the mug in more than likely bubble wrap to keep it safe when it's being shipped or couriered, and also the box that the mug comes in. Those things are about 5 rand each. Maybe you get them a little bit cheaper, but then you would also need to buy the bubble wrap. If you're only charging people for courier fees, then you would obviously be losing out 6 rand per order, or you wouldn't necessarily be losing out on 6 rand per order, but you would be losing out on 6 rand worth of profit or time. I want to take you through the spreadsheet that I've created, just so that when you're wanting to download the spreadsheet, you can use it and know exactly how it works, and also use this as a reference point if you forget. Alright, so this is the document that I've set up. It has 3 different tabs on it. The first tab is the instruction tab, and which is what I'm going to go over at the moment. So we have the quick setup. Now the quick setup is there's literally very few things that you need to do to this document. All of the formulas I've already calculated and worked out for you. So you need to go to the rates tab and insert your hourly rate. I've got my hourly rate set at 100 rand. You can charge more, you can charge less, whatever you feel is reasonable. I feel that because I'm not charging profits, I feel that 100 rand is probably good. For me personally, you could charge 150 rand. It's completely up to you. And then you need to charge your percentage markup. Now this will be applied to all of your materials. So if you use heat transfer vinyl, etc., that's the price that it'll charge there. So once you've done that, you can then hide the tab by right clicking and clicking on hide sheet, just so that it's, you're not looking at it. If you want to change it regularly, then you can. Then we go back to the setup tab. And then it says go to the price calculation tab, add in or adjust your raw materials marked in orange. So that's this column over here. These are worked out from mostly Snippy Sisters prices, so you might not even need to change a lot of them. I would just double check them to see that they're updated and according to what you would want to charge as well. If you want to charge a little bit more per raw, that's completely up to you. Then we have instructions on how to use the calculator. So that's what I'll go over now. So we're going to start with adhesive or heat transfer use. What you would do is you would add the size of the design in columns C and D. So if you have somebody that comes to you and they want a 12 by 12 design like my t-shirt as an example, then you would go to the heat transfer vinyl section, or you can drop down on the type. If you want to make the file so that it's a little bit less busy, then you can clear all of those values, select heat transfer, and then it'll only show you the heat transfer material types. So this is obviously white heat transfer, so it's just plain heat transfer. So we can go 30 by 30 because 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. But what the formula does is it calculates the square meterage of that size. Then based on your raw cost per A4, it will then work out a multiplier, which it'll then apply to the value. So as an example, this multiplier is then 1.5, and that's worked out on 600 square meters, or square centimeters rather. And then it'll show you the raw cost. So in order for you to buy a 30 by 30, it will then show you as 45 Rand. That's what it'll cost you if you buy per A4. As our multiplier was set to 2 for our raw materials, our retail value price of the 30 by 30 is 90. So we're going to type in 1 because the client, our fake client, aka me, has only ordered one of them. And then we add in the hours. So this would probably take me about half an hour to do. So let's add 0.5 there for half an hour. And then we're going to the clothing section. So we're going to add that there. And like I said, I'm going to be using a pick and pay t-shirt. So I'm just going to add 1 there. And that obviously calculates in the 40% for getting the t-shirts. Typically, if you could probably put it as 50 Rand if you manage to get 2 for 100 Rand special, but that doesn't always work out like that. So I don't like to work it out on that price. Obviously, if I'm just doing it for myself, if you change it then to 50 Rand, it then changes the cost price there as well. So I just leave it at 60 for now. And then we can see there that the recommended price is 197 Rand. So your raw cost is 105 Rand. That's what it actually costs you to make the t-shirt. And your total, less your raw cost, so you could consider that this as your profit, would be 92 Rand on the t-shirt. So this is obviously just a general guideline. If you're wanting to play around with your rates, if you're wanting to make that 30%, you can change that there, and it'll then automatically update everything here. So it'll be 186 Rand for your t-shirts. It all depends on what numbers you're comfortable with, but this gives you a very good indication on what you should be charging for clients. So I'm going to select all of them and show everything, because what I want to do here is I want to show you how to add an additional line item. Let's say under the sublimation section, we want to add another row. So I'm going to add it above there. I'm going to put here rubber coasters. Then I'm going to change that to the empty field. I'm going to change that to sublimation. So I'm just going to click on the little square and drag it down because it's a sublimation product. Then what you would need to do when you're adding in a new product, so you need to highlight the entire row. Let's just make it the entire row. On that little square, hover over it so that your mouse becomes a cross. Click on it and drag it down so that it applies all the same formulas to that row. Then we go and change the raw cost, because the raw cost of this is actually only 20 Rand. And then when we're working out the price calculation for that, we can then add in 1 sublimation print. So that's 1 sublimation print. Let's take those out. And then 1 set, or I think this is actually about 2 sublimation prints, because you get 5 rubber coasters in a pack. So that's probably 2 sublimation prints and then 1 pack of rubber coasters. So then your price would then be 130 Rand minimum that you would need to charge with a 70 Rand profit. So some people generally do say, whatever your raw cost is, times that by 2. Obviously, we haven't taken any time into account here either. Say it'll take us an hour to do this, then your retail value would be 230 Rand. You can obviously play around with the formulas and things like that. You can hide these fields if you don't want to see them You can hide that field and these ones, and then you just have your price calculation there, so you don't have to worry about all of the other calculations. They just run in the background and you don't see them. You can then just look at your raw cost, or you can even hide that one as well, and you can just have the fields that you need to then enter, and then it'll give you your price down at the bottom. So you really don't need to worry about editing too much. Once you've set up the document, you can pretty much just let it run for you. Well, I really hope that was useful information for you. The document took me a really long time to put together initially, and I've been using it for a really long time. So I really hope that it brings you some sort of use and that you can more easily and quickly give quotes to your clients. If you have any improvements on the document that you would like to see me implement, please let me know in the comments or send me a message. I'd be happy to adjust it. The link to the free file on my website will be in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in next week's video. And remember, be kind to someone today. Bye!